We begin tonight with this.
I expect that I probably will support some Republican candidates for Congress or Senate in the elections in 2010.
Senator Joe Lieberman, actually Chairman Joe Lieberman, because the Democratic Party gave him the chairmanship of the Homeland Security Committee. Chairman Joe Lieberman has announced that he will hit the campaign trail in 2010, just like he did in the last election, working hard against his own party. Spooky, right? It is the night before Halloween, so perhaps the most satisfying and self-indulgent way to explain how important this is, what this really means in political terms, is by way of a brand new episode of Rachel Maddow's show, Strained Metaphor Theater. Tonight's episode takes place 1 year from now, on the eve of the 2010 midterm elections. 'Twas the night before Halloween 2010. The Democrats were ready to party again. They had the most Senate seats, and so goodies to match. They'd give out the candy, not McConnell or Hatch. Then into their lair sneaked old Senator Joe with the idea of giving destruction a go. He smashed up their party and trashed all their candy, breaking what made being a Democrat so handy. The next night, the Democrats came to the door. Trick or treat! But there weren't any goodies that they had come for. Aww. When Lieberman himself showed up and said trick or treat, the Democrats said, "Dude, are you high?" Oh, wait, that doesn't rhyme. When Lieberman himself showed up and said trick or treat, the Democrats said, "Joe, you're the reason we got beat." Joe says he's fighting against those who won't heed him. Really, he's, biting the hands that feed him. You are not to hold that against the staff of this show. I insisted. The blame is all mine. Especially blame me for the mixing of the Christmas poem with the Halloween theme, plus the TV show. Yeah, I'm sorry. For all of that messiness, that is actually metaphorically correct. That is what Joe Lieberman is doing by campaigning for Republicans. He is fighting against the thing that gives him most of his power as a senator, the Democratic majority. If Senator Lieberman gets his way, if when he campaigns for Republican Senate candidates, they win, and the Democrats thereby lose their majority in the Senate, Senator Lieberman himself loses too. He loses the chairmanship he so prizes, which the Democratic Party inexplicably still allows him to keep. When he campaigns for Republican candidates, he is biting the hand that inexplicably feeds him, pardon the split infinitive. But this is not just a story about Joe Lieberman campaigning against his own party. This is also a story about Joe Lieberman campaigning against his own party again. You will recall that Senator Lieberman campaigned for Republican Senator Susan Collins. He campaigned for former Republican Senator Norm Coleman. He campaigned for Republican Congressman Peter King in 2008. He even admitted at the time that he didn't want his own party to win too many seats in the election.
Do you agree that Senator Hatch said to me that if we don't at least have the firewall of the filibuster in the Senate, that in many ways America will not survive?
Well, I hope it's not like that, but I fear
that in many ways America will not survive. That was in addition to Senator Lieberman campaigning against the Democratic nominee for president, which entailed him saying things like this.
Is he a Marxist, as Bill Kristol says might be the case in today's New York Times?
Well, I must say that's a good question.
After the election, it came time to determine whether Senator Lieberman should be given a powerful committee chairmanship by the Democrats. The very same Democrats he had just been not only campaigning against, but calling Marxists and saying how bad for America it would be if they won. Suddenly, with his chairmanship at stake, Senator Lieberman decided that he was very, very sorry.
Obviously, in the heat of campaigns, that happens to all of us, but I regret that, and now it's time to move on.
It's, of course, quite rational for Mr. Lieberman to want to move on. I'd want to move on, too, to the parts where Democrats forget that I said it was a good question whether or not Barack Obama was a Marxist. He, of course, wants to move on to the part where the Democrats forget all about that and then lavish him with political favors. But Senator Lieberman said he wasn't just sorry for what he had done during the campaign. He at least implied that he wasn't going to do it again.
This is the beginning of a new chapter. The problems our country faces now at home, particularly and abroad, are immense, and we will only deal with them constructively on behalf of the people who are good enough to send us to Washington if we display the kind of unity that was displayed within our caucus today.
Unity. Here's what Joe Lieberman's new chapter of unity with the Democratic Party and him looks like. He's going to campaign for Republican candidates against the Democratic Party in 2010. And as a bonus, he's promising to make history by siding with the Republican Party against the Democrats to not just vote against health reform, but to block Democrats from even being able to vote on health reform. Without Lieberman's pledge to filibuster, Democrats would only need 50 votes to pass health reform, which would mean America would not only get the public option, America would basically get most everything that's on health reformers' agenda. Senator Lieberman's decision alone is going to make it take 60 votes in the Senate to pass health reform, which means goodbye health reform, hello health minor tweak here and there. Less than a year after he begged to be allowed to stay in his own party in the Senate, Lieberman is going to filibuster that party, filibuster his own party on one of the most important domestic policy issues in a generation. And so far, there appears to be just one Democratic senator who has said a word against Lieberman's decision. It was Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa, who succeeded the late Ted Kennedy as chair of the Health Committee. Senator Harkin today sent this minor shot across the bow. Quote, he still wants to be a part of the Democratic Party, although he is a registered independent. He wants to caucus with us, and of course, he enjoys his chairmanship of the Homeland Security Committee because of the indulgence of the Democratic caucus. So, I'm sure all of those things will cross his mind before the final vote. Joining us now is Howard Fineman, senior Washington correspondent and political columnist for Newsweek and political analyst, of course, for MSNBC. Howard, thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Rachel.
Senators don't usually talk about other senators the way that Senator Harkin has talked about Senator Lieberman there. Does that what counts as an overt threat in the U.S. Senate?
Yeah, that was very overt. Tom Harkin doesn't make the decisions, and Tom Harkin is known as a guy who's sometimes willing to say what's on his mind, shoot his mouth off a little bit. But there's no doubt that he was expressing the frustration that many, many Democratic senators feel about Joe Lieberman. They've had it up to here with Joe Lieberman. They can't stand a lot of his maneuvers. They don't even like him personally, but they got to live with him because of the mathematics of the Senate. The little fig leaf that Joe Lieberman and Harry Reid, the leader, have put over this situation is to say that Lieberman will not join a filibuster to prevent the bill from being taken up at all. That's an important procedural point to Harry Reid, and it may turn out to be important in the maneuverings here. You have to understand that Lieberman said, you know, we're talking about final vote here, and Harkin mentioned final vote. The vote to take up the bill is one that Lieberman has said he will not block. That's important to Harry Reid. It's a very small victory procedurally. In terms of him pledging to block the final vote, though, unless the public option is taken out of the bill, I know, Howard, you've covered Senator Lieberman for a long time. How do you assess his strategy there on pledging to block the final vote? Well, I think it's somewhat negotiable. Everything with him is negotiable, as he's proved. He kind of enjoys his pariah status, and he wants to get as much out of it as he can. It may be something having to do with support for other projects. It may have something to do with 2012, when Lieberman's going to be up again, although I think Lieberman's the kind of guy who will keep his options open. Who knows which convention he'll show up at in 2012. I think he probably wants some further cushioning and padding for the insurance industry, which in many ways will make out pretty well in this deal. He would like them to make out better. I don't think it's final till it's final. And I sort of believe Harry Reid when he says he's got a lot of problems, but actually right now Lieberman's not at the top of the list because Lieberman will at least let the debate begin. If Lieberman does end up being the problem for the Democrats on the final vote, if he continues to put himself as this sort of sticking in the craw position, as you say, sort of gleefully doing it, what about the possibility of him losing his chairmanship? That's the sort of thing that doesn't happen very frequently in the United States Senate. I remember when it happened in the House on the Republican side when Chris Smith was removed from the Veterans Affairs Committee. It's not the sort of thing that happens frequently, but couldn't it happen to Lieberman? Well, I think it could. Look, if he brings down health care reform. Even if it is a series of tweaks, it's going to be a big sweeping series of tweaks. He will incur the wrath of the entire Democratic Party from top to bottom, because I think a lot of people who wanted more thoroughgoing reform, are getting in the position to settle for whatever Obama can get here. I think we're almost at that position. If Lieberman scuttles that, then he'll be a pariah even more at the White House, with Rahm Emanuel, with the President of the United States, with the entire Democratic Party leadership. Who knows? I think they could punish him if he's the one vote that stops the thing. But what Lieberman's going to look for are 2 or 3 other people to go along with him, perhaps a Senator Blanche Lincoln, somebody like that. I'm not convinced he has the guts to do it on his own.
Newsweek's Howard Fineman, thanks for your perspective tonight, Howard. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Rachel.